Number 1, we're taking the square root of 25, and the square root of 25 is 5, and that's because 5 squared is equal to 25. And the square root of 64 is equal to 8, and that's because 8 squared, or 8 times 8, is equal to 64. Let me mention that the square root symbol means the positive root. In other words, minus 8 times minus 8 is also equal to positive 64, but when we say the square root of 64, we mean the positive square root. We have a simple rule for multiplying square roots. When we multiply two square roots, we multiply underneath the square root symbol. Alright, so let's apply this over here. So the square root of 7 times the square root of 3 is equal to the square root of 7 times 3. So we multiply underneath, which is the square root of 21. Right, using the same rule, first let's multiply the numbers, the coefficients, or the numbers outside the square roots. 4 times 3 is 12. And now the square root of 5 times the square root of 7, we're multiplying underneath the square root symbol. 5 times 7 is 35. So we have 12 times the square root of 35. Right, before we do number 5, let's do the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. Let's look at this example. If we multiply underneath the square root, we have square root 25, and the square root of 25 is equal to 5. Now, we could have skipped this intermediate step and gone straight to 5. All right, that's the meaning of the square root. When you multiply a square root by itself, you get the number on the inside. Okay, so over here, the square root of 13 times the square root of 13, we could go straight to 13. Or if we multiply 13 times 13, we get 169, and the square root of 169 is equal to 13. Let's look at another little example. Let's say we have the square root of 279 times the square root of 279. Well, here I think rather than multiplying 279 times 279 and then taking the square root, we know that when we multiply a square root by itself, we get the number on the inside. All right, let's start by multiplying 3 times 4. And now let's multiply the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, and that's just 5. 5 without the square root symbol. So here we have 12 times 5, or 60. We also have a division rule similar to that multiplication rule. If we're dividing two square roots, square root of a, say, divided by the square root of b, we divide underneath the radical symbol. So we have one square root, and we're dividing a divided by b. All right, so that's our division rules, our division rule. So let's apply that over here. We're going to divide 50 divided by 2, and we get the square root of 25, which is equal to 5. Let's apply that rule again. So we're going to divide 45 divided by 5, and that's the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is a perfect square. 9 is equal to 3 times 3. The square root of 9 is 3. When we take the square root, we always remove that square root symbol. For example, let's look at this little example here. Let's say we take the square root of 16. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4, because 4 times 4 is 16. Now, even though 4 is a perfect square, 4 is equal to 2 times 2. We stop over there. This is not equal to 2. We don't continue and take another square root. If I were to write the following, square root 16, and take the square root of that, then square root of 16 I could replace with 4, and square root of 4 then is 2. Okay, so here we get 4 and here we get 2. The next example, we could start by multiplying 3 times 6 and then dividing by 2, or we could do our division first. Since dividing will make numbers smaller, I always suggest dividing first. So we're going to divide square root 6 divided by 2. We can do that underneath the square root symbol, and we end up with a square root of 3. And we can write 1 in the denominator, or we can just leave that out. So we end up with the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which is 3. All right, again, I suggest instead of multiplying 5 times 15, I suggest doing this division first. So we can divide 3 into 15. All right, so let me just copy over that square root 5. And 3 into 15 is 5. So we have square root 5 times square root of 5, which is 5.